Hi everyone, it's Adult Services Librarian Eric, and in this tutorial video I'm going to be going over how to make this lion thread art project that we're giving away in the summer to celebrate our Tales and Tales summer reading program. If this doesn't look terribly impressive to you right now, this is kind of the beginner version of this project. So I will be showing you a couple different ways to dress this up a little more to make it pop a little bit. But this is actually about 3 to 4 hours worth of work already, so I just wanted to provide like a little intro, a simpler version, and then as the video progresses, we'll show you more and more kind of, I don't know if I would say advanced techniques, but different levels so that you can make this a little dressier, a little fancier, and make the lion pop a little more out. Okay, so let's go over what we'll need besides a healthy amount of time and a vast amount of patience. So let's go over everything you're going to need to put together your lion thread art kit. Your kit will include, from Cromaine, nails. Yours will probably be in a plastic baggie or something like that. 5 different colors of thread, so we're going to have black, white, a golden yellow for the main part of the lion, and then 2 different colors of brown. One will be like kind of orangey and one will be on the red side, and these are for the mane. You'll receive 2 patterns, and we'll get to why you're going to have 2 patterns in just a little bit. A board, and I've chosen to dye this board green. Yours will be green probably as well, unless it looks really terrible because I'm doing this pilot thing today for the video. But you can't really be king of the jungle and not be in the jungle, so I think a green board is pretty appropriate for a lion thread art kit. That's everything that's going to come in the kit. So you'll need to supply a hammer. And if you watched my last thread art video, you know that I recommend a very small, like lighter hammer. This is a tiny hammer I got from Harbor Freight for like $2 or $3. It's only 8 ounces. And again, you don't want one of these gigantic framing hammers. This is just gonna hurt your fingers or bend every single nail we give you. And since we're only giving you kind of around the number of nails you need to complete the project, you definitely don't want to be wasting nails with a giant hammer. So I'd really recommend going to a craft store or even like a Home Depot or Harbor Freight especially, I know will definitely have these tiny, tiny hammers that are much more suitable for crafts. Speaking of banging in nails, I would also recommend using a pair of needle nose pliers. My big sausage fingers are just not nimble enough to hold these tiny, tiny nails. And this really helps me not bend over the nails when I'm pounding them in. On that note, unless you have extremely nimble fingers, it's going to be pretty hard to tie the knots when you're done. And there's going to be a lot of different sections, as you'll see, of different color thread. So I recommend using super glue to kind of tie off the loose threads when you're finished doing a particular section. If you have nimble fingers or maybe just smaller, slender, more agile fingers, you can probably just tie a double knot to end it and kind of keep it out of the way, but there's just no way that I'm able to do that. Lastly is a towel. You're going to want to protect whatever surface you put your piece of wood on because you are going to be, even though they're small nails and you're not going to have to hit them very hard, you're still going to be putting over 100 nails into this little piece of wood. And if you're just laying it on a table or something, you might scratch it or do damage whatever piece of furniture you're using. So definitely use a towel or some kind of mat, maybe a cutting board, something so that you're dispersing the force that you're going to be putting on your board. If you got Cromaine's thread art kit way back in February, a lot of these first couple steps are going to be essentially the same. So feel free to skip these first few steps if you've gotten that kit or if you're familiar with thread art from just your personal experience. I do think there are going to be a couple of different steps and tips that I'm going to show you on how to put this particular piece together that will still be useful. So maybe just skip down until we start putting the thread in. But otherwise, the first step with any thread art kit is to position your pattern. These pieces of paper are going to be very similar in size to the piece of wood You can see there's not a lot of extra here. So I'm just going to eyeball it to center. If you wanted to, you could measure this piece of wood, both the vertical and horizontal, and then put marks on your piece of paper and on the board and kind of line them up. I really don't think that's going to be necessary for anybody to do because of how little extra room there is. But you're going to position this roughly where you want the design to go. And then one thing I forgot to mention that you might need or want is some tape to hold your pattern in place. I don't think it's 100% necessary because the next step is going to be driving in nails. And once you get a couple nails in here, the pattern's not going to go anywhere anyway. But just for funsies, I'm going to tape this down. You really only need one side. Sometimes I'll do two if I'm feeling fancy, but I think for now I'm just going to do the one. The next step is to start pounding in your nails. So I will take a nail and my pair of needle nose pliers. And you'll see that there are a bunch of circles or dots on your pattern. Position your nail as close to the center of the circle as you can and just lightly tap it in about halfway. And if it's a little out of kilter like that one was, just kind of give it a couple taps. And there you have it. You did a nail. You're going to do every nail in this pattern, and there are quite a few, so this might take a little while. After you're finished hitting the nails in, it should look something like this. As I mentioned, if you decide you want your design to be a little bit different, we have all these lines in here, so feel free to, for instance, if you decide you want the main all one color, you don't need to do all these extra lines. And if you decide you want some kind of rainbow lion, like I said before, just put extra nails in some of these lines. Be creative. It's one of the few things that separates humanity from the animals, in my opinion. So once you're done with that, you might want to take a little bit of a break because there are about 180 nails in this thing. That took me almost an hour, I think. I wasn't exactly timing it, but something in that neighborhood. But after you take your well-deserved and earned break, it's time to take this pattern off. You're going to want to just kind of rip it off very slowly. Yours will probably be at least a little bit easier than mine because I used cardstock, and I believe I'm going to be making your patterns out of regular printer paper. But it's still not really a picnic trying to pick these off the sheets. So just take your time and try not to bend any of your nails. Next, what you're going to want to do is take a look at your nails and see that they're all at relatively the same height. Ideally, they would be at exactly the same height, but it's not like you have to take a laser level or some kind of like NASA level micrometer and make sure that they're all within thousandths of an inch of each other. As long as the nails that are next to each other are relatively straight and at relatively the same height, you're going to be okay. So definitely take your time doing this step because there's nothing worse than once we get threading, which is the next step. Once you start wrapping your thread, realizing that you've got two nails that are like way out of whack and it's hard to get the thread around both of them and they're right next to each other, there's not much you can really do at that point. So definitely take your time. Take a good look at your nails, especially the ones that are next to each other, and make sure they're close enough to the same height where it's not going to be an issue getting the thread around the heads of the nails and doing all of that stuff. And I'll just show you, if you do have a couple crooked nails, it's bound to happen. It happens to everyone. This is where your pliers are really going to be a lifesaver. Take them and kind of go over the nail that's a little out of whack and just bend it back into place. These are really thin nails. They're really easy to manipulate. So just take your time and do that. And again, this whole thing is going to be covered in thread. So if you think it looks ugly right now, please keep going. Don't give up. It's going to look fine. Even if you have a whole heck ton of crooked nails and you leave them that way, it's probably not going to be very noticeable once we get the thread on and start doing our threading. And especially the finished product, you'll be amazed at how different this looks. So please don't get discouraged if you manage to put in a bunch of nails. Okay, we are almost ready to start putting thread on our piece. At this point, you might be wondering, why did Eric give us a second pattern? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if you look, after you've removed your pattern, and you look at this is incredibly confusing. At least to me. Maybe you can see exactly what everything in here is supposed to be, but to me it just looks like, I don't know, like a copper minefield or some kind of strange copper porcupine sticking out of my board. Well, this second pattern is so when you start putting your thread on, you can see what this design is actually supposed to be. You can tell that this is a mane. You know, you could even, since all of this is going to be covered in thread, you can even lightly take a pencil and start numbering these regions. I'm not going to do that, but it's not actually a bad idea just to say, you know what, this is region 1 and this is the nose, and I'm going to match that up right here with like just a lightly, very lightly penciled in number. I think that'll be helpful. And before we get to threading, there is a note that unlike the birds on a branch, if you did that thread art kit that we had in February, it is kind of important what order you put your colors on, which areas you do first. So for instance, I think I'm going to do the eyes white and these 3 areas right here around the mouth white. So I'm going to do those first because they're going to be underneath everything. I'm going to be doing the outside of the eyes black and these lines, probably all of these lines in the face black. And I want that to go over the white. So if I do the white, if I did the black first and then I did the white, there wouldn't be much black left. The same thing with the lion's face. It's going to be a yellow color, like that golden lion yellow. So I'm actually going to have to do the white and then that gold and then put the black on top because I want the black to kind of separate out these areas. So think about the order that you're going to be applying these colors. I would think the mane would be last because if you look at a lion's face, it's got the gold, but then the mane kind of overshadows it a little bit when you go around the face. So I think the mane is probably going to be the last thing I do, unless I decide, which is possible. I haven't made a final decision yet, so unless I decide that I want to outline the whole face in black and maybe even put a border around the mane in black or gold to really set it out. But just think a little bit about what colors you want this to be, and you could even, if you really wanted to, take some crayons and color in these different areas to kind of get a preview of how it looks. I'll be providing a PDF link to this pattern as well, so if you wanted to do a couple different variations to figure out exactly where you want to put every color, just go crazy. Be creative, go crazy, and decide. Maybe you do, like I said, want some kind of unicorn lion, and you want to color every single one of these areas in a different color thread. You could definitely do that if you wanted to, and I encourage you guys to don't just copy what I'm doing. I'm doing something that I think looks cool, but there are literally almost an infinite number of ways that you could create this thread art, and maybe some ways are going to be things that are more appealing to you than the one that I'm doing. So definitely take your time and figure out exactly what you want this lion to look like. Okay, it's time to start threading, and this is the least fun for me, but probably the most fun part for you at home, because the way you have to start threading is to pick the area that you're going to start in. Again, I said I'm going to start with the white. because I feel like that is going to be like the lowest color in terms of the importance of it being above any other color in the piece. And you're going to pick a nail and tie a double knot around that nail. And these fingers are just not made for that kind of delicate work. So, fortunately for you, I'm going to speed this up. That was 2 minutes, and that might actually have been record time for me. So once you have your color double knotted around one of the nails, you're going to start by outlining the entire shape that you're doing. In my case, I started with that kind of facial area around the mouth, and since I'm going to have black going over it, I don't think I'm necessarily going to worry about doing that interior line kind of down the middle of the mouth. But I am going to outline that whole, like, kind of 3 circular-ish, square-ish, rectangular areas that make up the mouth. And basically, you're going to repeat this process for the rest of the piece. And that's basically the process you're going to use. Pick a section, decide what color you're going to do it in, go around the whole border, and then fill in the center however you like. You can go as thick or as thin as you want with the thread. You can see here I have done the nose, mouth area, and both eyes. I think next I'm going to do the gold of the lion's face because I feel like I want the mane and all of that to kind of overshadow it, and I'll probably do the black last just in case I do think that I need to do the whole outline. And I'm going to film myself doing various parts of that, but essentially the process is going to remain the same. And here's a little bit of a, well, not a pro tip because I'm not a pro, but a little tip if you're using super glue like me. You can see that I super glued this nail. Well, you probably can't see it, but take my word for it, I super glued this nail and I actually wrapped the excess thread around another nail to hold it in place while the super glue dries, and that's just going to make it a lot quicker for you to go around this whole thing. And then, you know, later you can just eventually take off the excess thread that's not glued down, or even, you know, like this, it looks pretty good. You can't actually, I think, tell that it was tied down here, and you could even just re-super glue that part later if you wanted to. But I'm going to get going on the rest of these 5 colors. And there you have it. Here we have a perfectly serviceable king of the jungle for you to hang in your house. But like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm also going to show you a couple ways to improve on this lion, in my opinion, improve it, really make it pop out, and maybe not the king of the jungle, but the emperor of the jungle, if you will. So stay tuned, and I'm going to show you how to kind of outline the facial area and also outline the mane to make it super fancy, a super, super sassy lion to rule over all of the jungles of the world.